Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next live session. Our second topic is called payroll, and this is what it's about. When you automate any business, you need to pay salary or other type of earnings to your employees. So you have people who work for you, and you're responsible for paying them for their work. So these payments should be somehow calculated, first of all, and registered in a proper way in order for the tax authorities to be able to access them and to check that, for example, you paid all proper taxes for the salary that you pay to your employees. So there are at least two different tasks. First, you need to figure out how much you need to pay everyone. And second, you need to figure out how much taxes you need to pay to your jurisdiction. Because as far as I know, the employer is always responsible for paying taxes for its employees, at least for those who are full-time employees of his. So let's see what business processes are here and how we approach their implementation. So this episode is called Payday, and this is the model application where the solution lives. So you can always check how it works and what it consists of. And this is what it looks like. So Payday is the first part of the application. So first of all, we need to create calculation methods, and then we need to create earning types. And these are different things. So calculation methods basically are formulas that you use or different ways of calculating how much you owe to some of your employee. For example, somebody can work on yearly salary, which is a very common practice in North America. So you have your salary per year, and each month, or more often twice a month, you get some part of this salary, which is calculated as base salary divided by 12 or by 24. So this is one way of calculating salary, okay? So this is what a calculation method is, what formula you use to calculate your salary. Another example, you have some subcontractors or maybe some employees who work on hourly basis. So they get as much as their hours they worked for. So for example, you involve them in some task that took them 3 hours to implement, and you need to pay them for these 3 hours. And you have an agreement that each hour of their work costs, for example, $15. So you need to multiply $15 by the number of hours. And this is how much you need to pay this employee. So this is another type of calculation. Hourly rate multiplied by the number of hours worked. And there might be many more examples like that, but you got the idea. The idea of the calculation method is that it's the specific way of calculating how much you need to pay your employee depending on different situations. So it's basically a formula where you specify some inputs like yearly salary or hourly rate and the number of hours worked. And based on this input, this formula calculates the output, which is how much you need to pay this person. So this is what calculation methods are. And in our case, it can be implemented differently, but for our practice test, we ask you to have calculation methods predefined on the level of the application. So users have no way of changing calculation methods, with the exception of changing the input parameters of those methods, of course. But they cannot change the formula, they cannot add a completely new formula and then use it to calculate salaries. So this is not our task. In our example, all calculation methods are fixed, so users cannot change this list in any way. And as a result, we can be sure that calculation methods exist, and we can check which calculation method is used for each calculation. This is how our code understands what operation, what calculation it needs to do. And next part of this equation is called earning types. So these are different from calculation methods, and the difference is this. These are earning types, and first of all, I can create new earning types. I as a user, not only I as a developer, but I as a user as well. And each earning type has its corresponding calculation method. And the idea here is that there are different earning types that are calculated using the same formula. For example, what earning types we might have? We have hourly wages, right? So we have just straight and simple hourly work that is paid by hour. That simple as that. We have monthly bonus. So the person works for a month. We are happy with their work and we want to give them some extra to express our gratitude for their great job. So we give them some bonus, and we might calculate this bonus based on monthly salary or some other way. Another earning type, overtime, right? So what's the difference between hourly wages and overtime? The difference is obvious. Hourly wages are during normal working time, and sometimes you need to ask somebody to stay late at work and to work overtime for some reason. And in this case, you maybe want to pay more. So this is overtime. So different earning types is basically the different types of work you want your employees to do for you, and they are paid for differently by different rates or by maybe different formulas and so on. Okay, moving on. So earning types can be created by a user, which is how they differ from the calculation methods. Earning type has to specify which calculation method it uses. So again, this is what I already showed you. Each earning type has a reference to a calculation method. It knows how this earning should be calculated, by which formula. And the earning type also can have displacing earnings and baseline earnings. And this is what it means. For example, let's take normal shift. For example, you work for McDonald's, okay? You start your shift at 8 a.m. and you finish it at 12 p.m. and each hour is paid by $15 per hour. But during this shift, different things can happen and they will affect the way that you paid. For example, this shift can be displaced by some overtime. What it means? It means that during your shift, you get into the territory of overtime, which is just some hours outside of normal working hours. So you need to pay differently for this part of your shift, not for the entire shift, but only for this part. Or, for example, you get a sick leave. Let's say you get some small trauma, you cut your finger, or you get some burn, okay, you burned yourself, and you just took a sick leave for an hour. You go to emergency room, and you get back to work within an hour. But this hour you didn't work, you don't have to be paid, or maybe you should be paid by different rate. So you have your shift, but during this shift, different things happen. You maybe work harder than you should be because you're replacing somebody who is out. Within a single shift, you take two responsibilities. So you work twice as hard and things like that. So your normal shift needs to be automatically displaced with other earning types. Okay, so this is the idea. So displacing earnings are those who just cut off a piece of this earning and replace it with itself. And this period of time has to be calculated differently. And baseline earnings is when your earning depends on other earnings. For example, monthly bonus can be calculated on a flat rate, just $100 bonus for a good month. Or it can depend on the amount of other earnings you earned during this month. So you worked as many hours, your overall payment for this month, according to other earning types, is $1,000, for example. So your bonus is based on this baseline amount, $1,000, and maybe, for example, 10% of the total sum of your other earnings over this period of time. So this is what baseline earnings is. And the reason why we set this up is because once Enterprise provides you with the metadata classes that allows to do these kind of things more or less automatically, or at least helps you to deal with this kind of relationship between different earning types. So we need to set this up, and then we need to pass these data correctly to those metadata classes and to objects of those metadata classes, and they will perform the displacement, for example, for us, and we don't need to calculate it manually, or they will perform the baseline calculation for us, and they will give us a total over a period of time, and then we just apply our formula on top of this total, and this will be our bonus or something else. Okay, next. Rates. Okay, this should be simple. So rates is basically how much you pay for a specific earning type. It, of course, depends on the task, on the company, on the requirements of these company owners, or maybe on the requirements of the tax authorities and stuff like that. So it can be vary depending on many different circumstances and conditions. But the way we ask you to implement this during this practice test looks like that. So we pay different people different rates, and for good reason. Some of them are better than others, some employees, I mean, because they work longer and they know more and they are more experienced, or we want to keep them with the company, so we want to pay them more than other people. So rates is how much we pay each person for each earning type. Okay. So we have our favorite cashier, Agnes Blue, and we pay her $20 per hour for overtime, and $15 for a normal shift, and $8 for sick leave, and so on and so forth. And of course, there is a many-to-many relation between earning type and employee. So one employee can have different rates for different earning types. And of course, one earning type can have different rates for different employees. Okay, here the rates are the same in our example, but they can be different, obviously. So these are rates, which are quite straightforward. Okay, small detail about rates. The requirements we have in our application is that you can change rates as often as monthly, but not more often. So you cannot change the rate within 1 month. So you can set it up for a month and then you can reconsider it the next month, but not more often than that. So you need to come up with a solution to ensure this rule. Okay, this small piece of implementation is made for you already. So it's just say what you need to do. So just do it. We don't use it in this specific task, but the metadata classes that we use for this task require the presence of this object. So you don't need to do anything about it. Just create it and forget it. It needs to be here, but we don't use it. Now, payroll register. So during the Module 1 practice task, you get yourself into knowing the accounting register, which is a specific type of register for accounting purposes. And this is another type of task-specific register, which is called payroll register. So this one is specifically designed to make your payroll easier. Okay, so payroll register is the main metadata object we use to register how much we paid to each of our employees. So the same way as we register the business transactions when we buy or sell anything, the same way and for the same reason we register every payment ever made to any of our employees. Okay, so we use this register on the one hand to calculate how much we need to pay to a specific person, and on the other hand to remember how much we already paid to him. So this is at the same time the way of calculating salaries and the way of remembering the salaries that we paid to our workers. So we need to set up the payroll register in a way that it uses our earning types. So it knows that earning types live in the metadata object that we created before. It needs to remember which period of time is this payment for. If we pay our employees monthly, it should remember the month. If we pay weekly, it should remember week. So basically, it should remember the beginning of the period and the end of the period, which this payment is for. Okay. This is an important part. So I already mentioned the tax purposes that are basically the subtask of the payroll. Every time we pay a payroll to anybody, we need to pay taxes to tax authorities of our jurisdiction. And the thing about the taxes is that there are several fixed periods that you are allowed to pay taxes for. For example, I'm talking about North America now. I'm not sure how it works in other countries, but in North America, the way it works is that if you have yearly salary and you paid, for example, bi-weekly or 2 times a month, then you need to pay taxes monthly. So there are several options, but the most common one is you pay your taxes monthly. And the way about taxes is that this period should be isolated from each other. So if you pay your taxes monthly, all your payments should fit inside of each month. You cannot afford having a payment that extends from 1 month to another. It needs to be broken down into 2 different payments, because you need to know exactly how much money you paid within this tax period, so you know how much taxes you should pay for this period. So this is what this check is about. Your need to make sure that no payment periods extend from 1 month to another. They need to be split into 2 different records. So this is why. Okay, register hours worked. So there are 2 different tasks, actually. One task is to pay employee as much as they earned, and the different tasks is register how much they earned, because the first thing happens much more often. So your employee comes to work every morning and works for a certain amount of hours, and then goes home and comes back next day and works more. And you need to register the fact of each shift or each piece of work that he's done. And this should be some kind of a document. So for example, I come to work and my manager marks that I'm at work at 8 a.m. and then I'm out of work, and manager marks that I'm out of work at 12 p.m. So these 4 hours should be registered in the system, so it won't be forgotten. And by the end of the month, when the accountant of the company needs to calculate the salary, he just gets all these records of how much I work for each day, sums up the hours and calculates the amount that I should get as a salary. We need to register how much every person, every employee worked and what type of work it was. So basically, what earning type is this? It's one type of document, and the completely different type of document is by the end of the month, we need to calculate how much we owe to this employee. And they are connected, of course, because our salary calculation depends on the amount of time worked, but they are different documents because they are registered in different times and for different reasons. So we need a document that registers how much time each employee worked, and this is what it should look like. So the name of employee, the earning type, the start of the work and the finish of the work. Yeah, okay, you will figure it out yourself, hopefully. So this is the work with the document form, again, quite simple. And this is the second document from these 2 I just talked about. So payroll is a different document that you register less often. And this is where you do 2 things. So first of all, you calculate. There is a calculate button. So you calculate how much you need to pay to this person. So this is a calculate button. And there is a post button or post and close button, which just writes the calculated amounts into the register. And the thing about the calculation register is that, as I said, you use it both for calculation and for registering. So you write like raw data into the calculation register. For example, just you post the hours worked document entries into the calculation register as they are, and then you read them back, but you ask calculation register to adjust them according to displacement or to calculate the baseline for you, and the calculation register returns them in processed way. So you have easier task calculating the salary. But this is a different topic, and there are video lessons in this module that explain these concepts in details. So you have your payroll document that you use to calculate and to register how much you paid to every employee. You should have this form. You should be able to look into the payroll register to check if it works correctly. So we need this form to show it to you. So these are all the entries that are in the payroll register. So you will need the same form in your solution. So you will be able to check if it works correctly. Okay, and the second part is bonus, and this is what you should do. So in this case, the requirement of the task is to calculate bonuses according to the performance of your employees. So, for example, if you sell something, you want to reward the salesman who sells more than others. So you want to pay them bonuses based on the amount of money that they brought to the company, because this shows how good they are or how bad they are. If they are bad salesmen, they bring less money and they should get less bonuses. So you need another register to calculate how much each cashier brings, how much each cashier registers, and basically how much money it puts into the cash register taken from the customers. And based on this amount of money, you will be paying like performance bonuses to cashiers, not monthly bonuses, but performance bonuses, because monthly bonuses are different. They're based on the total amounts of earnings for the period of time. Then you just multiply it by some percent or something like that. And this is your monthly bonus. But performance bonus is based on your performance, on how much money you brought to the company. So you need another metadata object that stores this data. You need to register this data and keep track of them. And the way you do that is each sales document, besides of the posting records into other registers, it posts this information into the sales by cashier register. Okay, so you always know how much each of your cashiers basically earned or brought to the company or put into the cash register. Okay. So your sales document should make another posting. And then you need to calculate the performance bonus. So you need, again, another document that is called performance bonus. You set up the period of time that you pay this bonus for. And then again, it has calculate button. So it needs to read these sales by cashier data, and then put it through formula, and then give the bonus earned by this cashier over this period of time. And monthly bonus, we already discussed, it's just based on the total amount of other earnings that each employee earned over the period of time. We just multiply it by some percent, and this is our monthly bonus. But we have, of course, a different document for that, which again has calculate and post buttons. So you specify the period, you calculate bonuses, and then you write them down to the payroll register. And this is basically it. Bye-bye.